we go. What?
How many do we have? I've invited a few more.
Don't know, babe.
You're not live yet, no?
Just now. Okay. We will wait for a little bit to make sure that everything is okay. Let's see if we're officially live on, what's it called? On LinkedIn. LinkedIn.
We are live. I think we are live.
Okay. All right, let's wait. Oh. Okay. Okay. Let's wait for 1 more minute before we start this wonderful conversation on how the world is not going to end in the upcoming months due to everything that is happening with the taxes. I found. All right. So, hello, everybody. It is a pleasure to welcome you all, whether you're watching us live or you are going to be joining us and watching us later on in a replay, because we're so gorgeous in a replay, especially with a glass of wine or a beer. But yes, welcome, welcome, welcome. So today, let us first introduce ourselves a little bit, and then we're going to dive directly in, and we're not going to take too much of your time. We're just going to try to share as much valuable information as possible. So hi, my name is Yulia Blinova. My last name means pancake. Translating from Russian, I am the founder of Zignify Global Product Sourcing. We are a company that helps other companies across the globe find manufacturers anywhere in the world, optimize the costs, and do quality control, and do factory guided tours, and do sourcing trips, and so many other things. So today I am actually joined by a head of our product sourcing department, who is in charge of all of the sourcing that we do, and who manages both the ROW, rest of the world team, and the China team, Anja. So Anja, I kind of introduced yourself, but maybe you can give a little bit more information.
So hello, everyone. And by the way, Yulia, I didn't know that about your last name.
Yes.
We have been working for such a long time together. Very interesting fact.
By such a long time,
anyways,
you can tell people 5 years. You've been in Zignify for 5 years.
Yeah. So good to meet everyone. Yes, I'm the person who is doing and working hard with our team from the background. So you will not see me on the client calls, but we are working hard in the background to support your projects.
So today we would like to discuss Indonesia as one of the countries that is potentially an interesting, not specifically substitute, but a country from which you can benefit if you're looking into sourcing from the places other than China. So we have been, I personally, to give you a little bit more of my experience. I myself lived in China for over a decade, and I have been doing sourcing from China for the last 20 plus years. And originally, I come from the border with China, so this is a country that is very close to my heart. I have seen the developments, and I also have seen the developments around Southeast Asia. With everything that is happening in the world, with all of the uncertainties, it is time for us to consider, well, the time for us to consider some other places to do sourcing was actually years ago. So Anja has joined the Zignify team 5 years ago. Why? Because already back 5 years ago, we were doing a lot of sourcing in other countries. So Anja, what are the major concerns that you see when it comes to sourcing from China right now?
Well, I think by now everyone is aware of the worldwide situation, what's happening in between United States and China. The things are not very stable, and we have seen the practice that clients are turning to different options. And China, I feel that China has always been out there. For example, whenever you look at the labels, if you're looking at the labels, you will, in 90% of the cases, you will see made in China. From time to time, you will see made in Indonesia, and those would be those major brands usually, and they would be, Indonesia, where is that? So I remember that, even thinking about that, even as a teenager, I would be interested in the labels. So yeah, now is the right time, I think, to also look into the other options if you didn't do that by now. And definitely, I think that I know that Indonesia is one of them for sure.
All right. How do you know that Indonesia is one of the countries that is actually interesting to consider for people who are doing sourcing? And if you can answer that question, and if not, I will help you out on that one. What kind of businesses can potentially go to Indonesia to do sourcing?
Well, first of all, I want to say that Indonesia is not just magical when it comes to sightseeing and tourism and all those things. They have a lot of factories, and they're focusing a lot on shoes, textiles, furniture. And if you go a little bit more exotic, for example, Bali, you would see a lot of handcrafted items, unique items. And I think that's the beauty of Indonesia. But next to that, you can also find plastic, recycled things. They made a lot of things from other things, and definitely worth looking into and worth visiting as well.
That's true. And for Anja, she has been in Indonesia herself twice by now. I have been coming to Indonesia since 2013. Originally, I went there as a tourist, but from my perspective, there was always interest into understanding the business and how to do sourcing. So I'm just going to give a quick recap of why Indonesia can be a great country for manufacturing. So Indonesia, the population is large, right? We have over 240 million people. So this is fourth largest population on actually planet Earth. They have so this is a lot of labor, and this is one of the reasons why China back in the day became so efficient, right? Because there was a lot of labor, and labor costs were less expensive than they are today, for example. They have a lot of connections to China, and those connections, they help them develop and innovate, because you have a lot of descendants coming from China to actually Indonesia. So there's still that family connections, maybe 4 or 5 generations ago, but there's still that. And you have a government that is currently pushing people towards development, towards starting the business and growing those businesses. So one of the things I want to kind of jump directly in, and at the end we can discuss a few more categories of products that people can actually source from Indonesia. We'll show a small presentation with the screenshot, and people can take a photo of this. So finding manufacturers. So what we want to discuss today is finding manufacturers in Indonesia. What are the problems that you can face? What are the cultural cultural differences and business practices that you should actually pay attention to, and what makes Indonesian manufacturers so unique. And we will do a short comparison on the base of the textile products between China and Indonesia. What is good for what and why, and when, what kind of customers it's kind of good for. So Anja, you're the head of sourcing, right? What are the steps for you to actually find the manufacturers in Indonesia, except using one of your team members that is located in Indonesia and speaks Bahasa? What if you're a person who is located in the UK, in Germany, in the United States, and you want to do sourcing on your own without hiring us or any other sourcing person? What would you do?
You mean if I was just a business owner and I didn't know about Zignify?
Exactly.
Well, it's hard to speak about that now because I know all the things that I know now. But I would assume that I would just go on Google and maybe use Google Translate. But if I'm so not experienced, probably not. And I would just type in factory shoes Indonesia, and probably that would be about it.
All right. So are there any platforms that you would let's say you've worked for Zignify and you quit and you do sourcing, you decided to start your own brand. How would you do the sourcing? So what we're trying to do here is to give away, yes, the way that we do our work, right? So people can potentially do it on their own, and we're okay with this. We can't have everybody as customers. So what would you do specifically?
If I'm out of Zignify, can I still use Zignify database?
No, you cannot. You cannot use Zignify database. Sorry.
Okay. So yeah, okay. Then I know that there are platforms to be used with who have listed Indonesian companies, factories. So I would definitely go and use one of those platforms.
One of those platforms is Indo Trading, correct?
Yeah, Indo Trading. Well, few Indonesian companies can also be found on Alibaba as well. I mean, most of the people are familiar with Alibaba. So I would use those platforms. I would use, you said that I cannot use the database, right? I would use my sourcing colleague with whom I have good relationship. And she lives in Indonesia, and I would ask her for help. No, I'm just kidding. So basically those platforms would be my
go-to.
Definitely my yeah.
So I will kind of recap and add a few more things. So we need to understand that Indonesia is a country where the predominant language is Bahasa, and Indonesia, as much exports as it actually does towards other countries, it's actually not so large yet. So Indonesia, I have actually had communications with the Indonesian government, and I will be meeting with them soon as well, because we are one of the companies who is trying to promote Indonesia, because we do think they have a lot of resources and they can deliver wonderful work. So a lot of businesses in Indonesia are actually still working towards selling to the locals. So if I'm a factory that manufacturing, I'll show you a wonderful example. Here I have a lot of different types of wooden utensils. So wooden teak, right? Teak wood utensils. This is not teak wood. Please don't be fooled. So teak products is something that is extremely popular in Indonesia because teak actually grows in Indonesia. So the factories that we have mostly communicated with, they said, hey, we actually sell to the locals. We sell to the local brands, we sell to the local hotels, or we sell within Southeast Asia, right? So we need to think in those terms. Most of the factories, they don't have very good websites. They might not have the greatest English either. And you need to know how to, after you track down those factories, how to communicate with them. So one of the first things that I would do is I would definitely do the same thing as you. I would go on Google and I would use a combination of words. For example, teak, wood, spatula, manufacturer, Indonesia. But I would also potentially go a step further. I would try and find out the region in which most of the teak wood grows, right? And that can be easily done with Google, ChatGPT, Perplexity, where if you're using AI, I'm still a Google girl. You can find out in which region the products are or the trees actually grow, because most likely that is the region where the factories will be located. So I would say teak wood grows where in Indonesia, as simple as that. So the next step, I would also try to Google all of this in Bahasa. So I would go into Google Translate and translate wooden spoon manufacturer from English to Bahasa, and I would also try to find some companies, because again, the most important part we need to remember is Indonesia doesn't export so much yet, especially when it comes to what we call consumer goods, something that continuously can be, like fast consumer goods that can be sold. So this is one of the things to do. Indo Trading is a wonderful website as well, right? Alibaba, you can also sort there by country. Okay, let's say we kind of found one or two manufacturers, and now it's time for us to contact them. So, right, like this is a list. We haven't spoken to them yet or anything. We've seen a website, and the website shows a spoon. Or the website can also show some other wooden products. Maybe they show a table. Anya, if we're searching for a wooden spoon, but nowhere on the website we see that there is a spoon, but there is a wooden table or chairs or anything like this, would we still contact the manufacturer?
Depends. Ideally, we're looking for kitchen utensils. Ideally, we are looking for spoons and so on. If we don't get good results, clearly then we will go for companies who are producing items out of that material, in that case, teak wood. So let's say if we are not very successful, yes, then we will turn to a company that has a table, but they didn't put a spoon on the website, because most likely they will be able to make it. Just the question is, are they going to do it for us? Also depends on how attractive we are with quantities and so
Exactly.
on. But
So, and this, I think this is a common theme that people need to understand. It's not only in Southeast Asia, countries like Indonesia, but if you're looking at manufacturers in Germany, the websites is not their priority to update. So manufacturer is just that, a manufacturer. Their job is to produce, to make things. Usually they're not so great at sales. Hence, it is a lot of leg work to find them. From our side, we actually go to Indonesia and we walk around and we find manufacturers and we talk to them and we attend local trade shows, because a lot of them, they don't have up-to-date websites. So as Anya rightly said, if you don't find a wooden spoon, see if they produce wooden products in general, because they might actually do the spoons, but they haven't updated their website in 5 years. So this is one of the bigger things. So, okay, so we contacted a few manufacturers and maybe they started giving us pricing, right? And what is the best way for Indonesia? How do we keep in touch with the manufacturers? What do we use? What modes of contact?
Well, if they want to talk with us, they will speak English through WhatsApp. They use a lot of WhatsApp. So yeah, I mean, that's usually the fastest way to reach them, through WhatsApp. Usually they will not be so open to speak English on the phone. They prefer texting. Yeah.
That's very true. And that comes to one of the cultural things that we will mention a little bit later. Okay, so we got in touch with them. We got a few prices, right? Let's say we contacted 25 manufacturers and let's say 10 responded, and we already received prices from 5 and we still have a few pending. So what do we need to do to make sure that those factories actually are not going to scam us out of our money? So how do we verify those manufacturers? Because this is before ordering any samples, right? So before ordering any samples, what are the steps that I, as a person who doesn't know how to source, what should I do?
Yulia, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because we came across many paradoxes. So it's true that some of the factories do not update websites. And those factories might be huge, professional, big factories, but they just, have enough business and they just don't pay attention to the website. And then you will find situation where there is a great professionally done website, but factory is something different. And how do we get to know that? Well, clearly we are going to ask them for the registration documents and all the
Elaborate a
certifications they
little bit.
haven't.
What, so like, again, I don't know anything about sourcing. What do you mean by registration documents? So what do I need to actually say to the manufacturers?
Well, we are going to say, we want to check if you're a real factory. Can you please show us your registration number? And then we have a website where we go and check if the company is actually registered with the ministry, right? Indonesian ministry. But that brings me to the website comparison point that I made earlier. One of the most effective ways to see with what type of factory you're dealing with is request a live video call with whomever you're talking. Ask them to have a video call, and while you're having a video call, ask that person to go to the production area. Like that, you will see the factory. You will see if the factory has amazing website and it has 5 workers doing something in a small dusty room, or it's a big nice factory which can support your needs. So that's definitely one of the methods that we are using and that we are strongly recommending, next to asking for all the documentation of the factory, of course. And you would be surprised how many surprises we came across by requesting those videos. And of course, if they are you will come into the situation when they would be saying, office is in another place, factory is at another location, or I'm not at the office, or they will avoid providing such a video to you. Then that's definitely a red flag.
I think a lot of people, they kind of underestimate how important it is to actually verify the manufacturer with such simple steps, because they think, oh, but you know what, if they're going to send me a sample, that means they're a legit company. That's absolutely incorrect. So I give you an example. Let's say it's not for that product, but let's say we were doing this product. This actually happened to us, and the girls have found the manufacturer, and I looked at the website, and the website had one address for the company registration. The factory had a completely different address, and the distance was like 400 kilometers, 300 kilometers or something like this. I'm like, this is not okay. Right? So the devil is in the details. It will take you 10 minutes to check all of those things. But as Anja said, to recap, you need to ask for the company registration certification. Those are kind of standard. You can Google how they look like. And then Ministry of Trade of Indonesia, they have all of those companies registered. So they have like a registration number, like an identifier, and you can Google this and it comes out. Like in Europe, for example, we have a VAT registration. If we Google a company by VAT registration, it will show, is the VAT active or not? If it's active, you're like, okay, the company is registered, here is the name. And it's the same thing in Indonesia. So it's important to take a look at the website. It's important to ask for the certification. One of the things, it's very important to ask if they have an export license and if they have previously exported the products, meaning shipped out the products abroad. This is something very important to know, because if they didn't, then you need to find a trading company in between. Because again, Indonesian companies are still not that huge worldwide selling their products. Okay, so website, we looked, etc., etc. The point about the video, extremely important. And I think I want to reiterate to the people is, you do not ask the factories to send you just a video of the factory. You go with them on a live call. This is no different than talking to Chinese manufacturers. It's just, instead of using WeChat, you're using WhatsApp. Because in those moments, we can see the reality. We've seen some factories who produce for very large brands, and what you see inside is like, oh my God, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And they were not lying about producing for those big brands, but it's just the state of the development of those factories is a lot lower than it is in China. Okay, so we found the factory, we got in touch with them, we got prices. So Anya, on average, if you're looking at the MOQs, at the minimum order quantities, between, if we compare it between China and Indonesia, whose MOQ is going to be lower?
Well, Indonesia definitely. Chinese factories usually have high MOQs. Indonesian factories, as you said, they are not so much yet out there, so they will give a possibility of a lower MOQ simply for the fact to attract more customers, of course.
Exactly. So because there is still development there, they want to attract foreign customers outside of Asia. Why do they want to attract customers outside of Asia? Because those will most likely pay more than the ones in Asia, and they would probably require better quality. Okay, we talked to the factory, everything's great. We discussed the MOQ, we discussed the prices, we're ordering the samples, right? So do you, Anya, suggest to do a full sample review by the manufacturer with the photos and videos before the manufacturer actually ships it out to you, to the final customer?
Of course, I'm not gonna get a sample before I'm not gonna let them send a sample before I see the sample.
Exactly.
I want to see what they made. First, I want to see what they made, how it looks like. I want them to measure it next to the ruler or whatever device they use. I want photos of that as well. I want clear videos of my samples. When I see they look nice, then I want them to send it to me. But even then, I don't know how they're going to smell, for example, how they feel to the touch, and so on. Then I want them to be sent to me first or to someone from my team, right? Because I want to check the smell and all the other things that I couldn't see on the video. And then when I make sure the sample is good, then I will send it to the customer.
Well, in this case, you were the customer, right? So because when we're doing sourcing in Indonesia, we have our people on the ground in Indonesia. It's their job to check everything. But yes, to reiterate again, before the sample is sent to you, you need to have, you as a customer, as a buyer, you need to write down a few not SOPs, but a few specifications of the potential things that can go wrong. If you cannot come up with the ideas, simply Google, simply try to find some information on YouTube. If this is a product that is already being sold, go on Amazon or some other platforms and see the reviews for a similar product. Go into 1 and 2 star reviews, write down what the common problems are, and compile it in the list. And these are the exact things that the manufacturer needs to check, right, to document before actually shipping the sample to you. From our side, again, our people check on the ground before it goes anywhere. Okay, so what about checking references on the manufacturers? What is a good way of checking references on the potential manufacturer that you as a buyer found?
Well, I'm going to ask them who their customers are. Do they have any big customers? If they do, they're not going to hide those customers. Once they tell me who their customers are, I can always try to check that information, right? Depending where I am, what are my connections, and so on. So definitely that would be one of the things that I would do.
And that is absolutely correct, but that doesn't always work. So the problem is maybe they don't want to say who the customers are, maybe they have signed an NDA. So you can definitely Google import-export information, because if they have exported the product, you can type in the name of the factory and the word export or import, and some information might come up. One of the other ways is you can do it during the same video call where they are leading you through the factory. So one of the things you need to tell to the manufacturer, hey guys, I need to make sure that your warehouse where you store the finished products, that everything is okay in there. So please lead me through there. And if they have finished products, if they have boxes, there might be some
You
SKU
will show up.
numbers, brand numbers, and the same goes during the manufacturing. Maybe they're branding some products, maybe there's some packaging lying around. So you have two ways, right? Kind of spying, or three ways: asking, spying, and researching on Google.
Also use the platforms, right? Such as Import Yeti and similar to see if they show up there, where did they export and to whom.
Absolutely. So we've kind of covered both the ways of finding the manufacturers and what are the problems that can be faced there, right? Not all of the suppliers are listed online or legitimate. So to those of you who are looking to source products from Indonesia, for example, there is a wonderful trade show that will be happening in October in Indonesia, and it is a very, very unique one. Um, Me personally, I have visited many trade shows across the globe as a supplier who is exhibiting, and as a person, as a buyer as well. So Ministry of Trade of Indonesia, they actually have a trade show that is happening every October. It's called Trade Expo, and only Indonesian suppliers, Indonesian manufacturers are allowed in that trade show. So, and we will be visiting this trade show with our Indonesia Sourcing Trip, with our group as well, and attending different speeches there. But the point being is, most of the trade shows around Southeast Asia, they have 80% of Chinese manufacturers who are exhibiting. But this trade show is special because the government is only allowing Indonesian registered companies to participate. What are other ways of finding manufacturers? Of course, as always, I say, you can find other trade shows and go through the list of exhibitors, right? A list of exhibitors from the previous year, for example. So this is a way as well. Not every country has Alibaba, and even if they do, it doesn't mean it lists all of the companies. There are millions of factories out there, and what we see online is a tiny percentage of that. We know this because, again, like during the Indonesia sourcing trip that we did in March and February, March this year, we were going around tiny little neighborhoods, and around every corner, one right next to another, there is a factory, there is a factory, there is a factory. So it's a lot of groundwork. So if you can't go to Indonesia, go to Indonesia and walk around. Okay, so let me jump onto some cultural insights. So Anja, do you know what Guanxi is?
No, actually, I'm not familiar completely with that term, Yulia.
You are familiar, you just don't remember. Because you have been to China a few times by now. Actually, Guanxi, for those of you who don't know, it's connections, right? It's this networking. It's like getting things together with other people. So my connections with your connections, let's kind of do business together. So Guanxi, so connections. And you would think, like, everybody talks about China like they're the only ones who actually have this, but every country has this, right? If I know somebody who is a good friend who has this particular business, I would rather give my business to him or her than to somebody I don't know. It's simple logic. So Indonesia has also a very similar thing. So it's a mutual cooperation and a community spirit. So building relationship, right? Building relationship in Indonesia is extremely essential. And let the Indonesian people forgive me if I'm pronouncing this wrong, because I don't speak Bahasa, but it's called gotong royong. So gotong royong, this is the same thing like Guanxi in China, building relationships. So if you guys think that going and visiting manufacturers in China is important, Indonesia is at least on the same level, if not more so. Because we need to remember that Indonesia is also not only culturally, but religiously, it's a Muslim country. So they have a little bit of different traditions and way of doing business. They're very kind people. They love foreigners. They love working with people. They're very open and they're very spiritual. But making connections, visiting, like, seeing each other's faces it's very important. I mean, Anja, again, you've been with me to Indonesia during the last sourcing trip. What was your experience visiting the factories? Because we visited factories from the tiny, tiny ones with a few workers to the ones that are 15,000 square meters factory floor. So what was your experience visiting the factories?
Well, first I have to say that that was the second time going with you to Indonesia. First time we went for vacation to Bali, and that was actually my first sighting of Indonesian people, right? And I was completely enchanted. They were so calm, so they transferred just some type of peaceful energy to me. It was crazy. And then some of them, they would carry like a small piece of rice on their forehead. That was in Bali. I'm speaking about Bali. That was a spiritual, cultural thing, and I loved it the first time. And then second time, the trip was different. We went to Jakarta, but people were similar there as well. So calm, so peaceful, welcoming, warm. But and visiting factories was a completely different experience. But in a sense of how can I say, personalities, it was kind of similar as well. So whatever factories we visited, they welcomed us with wide hands, warm heart. They were open to show us everything. They were happy to have us there. Definitely, they have been amazing guests. I could feel that we are very welcomed there.
I think one of the bigger differences that I currently still see between Chinese manufacturers and Indonesian is Indonesian are not yet so much driven by money. They wanted to make people comfortable first, with a lot of
to make friends.
kind of exactly, because I have been to hundreds, if not thousands, of factories in China in over 20 years, and you have factories who are just happy to see you, who are just lovely and wonderful, and they really actually want to take you out for lunch and just have fun and just chit chat with you. It's not even about business. And then you have others who are like, no, business, 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 business. All of the factories that we've been visiting in Indonesia, even the ones who've been on the market since the 60s, right? Who produce like who make their own cotton threads from raw cotton. Even those factories we have seen they put the relationship, the friendliness first, and only later business. So they build on the mutual respect and mutual positive feelings. And I think it's very important to also mention that hierarchy and respect are two huge points when you're dealing with businesses in Indonesia, because in Indonesian businesses there is still a lot of bureaucracy and hierarchies, right? So from top to bottom, so you gotta know who the boss is, and you have to show respect to the senior figures in the meetings first, right? So you can be friendly to anybody and everybody, but it is still like big boss to big boss first, and then the rest of the people. So that still exists in the business in Indonesia, and this is something that you need to keep in mind. Another, I think, important thing, and this is what you mentioned, Anja, communication with the factories, right? So normally, when you get in touch with the factory, who do you communicate with? Do you communicate with a sales manager or with the boss? What is your experience?
Well, it depends how big the factory is. With the smaller factories, you will most likely communicate with the boss. The boss is the one who speaks English as well, because probably workers do not speak English. When it comes to the bigger factories, it's going to be one of the salespeople for sure.
And what you've mentioned is it's not about calling on WhatsApp, right? It's typing, it's writing on WhatsApp. And of course, time zones come into play into this. If you were, for example, in United States and the factory is in Indonesia, but it is also the indirect communications. So it is cultural, and this is important for people to know. It is cultural that Indonesians, they would prefer to avoid direct communication because of potential direct confrontation, right?
I have to, yeah, and I would like to add something.
Mhm.
So, us, for example, Europeans or Americans, sorry guys, I mean the entire continent, most of us will say, okay, it's after 5 p.m. I'm not doing business anymore. But in Asia and in Indonesia, that's not the case. So even if you don't pay attention to the time, you text them a little bit later, it's a nighttime where they are, they will respond to you. It's just how they
Yeah.
are.
I think another very important thing is what I mentioned on confrontation. Is you need to be very, very careful. And this doesn't only go for people from Indonesia. I would also apply this if you're doing sourcing from the Philippines, from Thailand as well. So, and the China also a little bit. In China, so all of these countries, and like keep on Indonesia. They're not dealing very well with confrontation. So you need to be a little bit more patient. For example, Anya, both you and me, we are Slavic. Our way of communicating is very different. It's very direct. However, when we talk to the factories, I would act as a more naive and softer person.
Well, now we know that. I mean, now I know that. I didn't know that in the beginning as well.
Well, we all learned,
But
and
true.
and that's exactly the point. So in Indonesia, it's very hard for them to face confrontation. So if somebody gave you some information and that information is not clear to you, and you come back to them with a little bit of anger, what will like, for example, you're gonna maybe you send a voice message that will sound a little bit rude, saying, hey, you know what, I've been waiting for 4 days for you to send me this information and you're sending me the wrong quotation. So after such a short message, what might happen is the person will never respond again.
Yeah, you will just get completely different result from what you want. That's true.
So this is not like communicating with the Chinese. With the Chinese, they're more business-like by now. With the Indonesians, people from Indonesia, they're still learning that way. So you need to be calmer. You need to be more Zen, more Buddha, more USA, more calmer. As simple as that. And keep in mind, they are not very good with confrontation. So you need to rephrase how you speak if you want to get the result that you want. So it doesn't matter if you are right, because most likely you are right. But if you want to get the result, you need to adjust your behavior, and you need to speak softer and express yourself in softer tones. You can still get the result that you require. Okay, so, Anya, what do you think? Like, we kind of discussed this already, but do you think building rapport, a better personal relationship, is important in Indonesia for doing business, or not so much? So, would you invest time into building a relationship with the factory?
Definitely. I mean, through my experience, I also noticed one thing we didn't mention, that they like to make jokes. When you start communicating, they would make small, subtle jokes here and there. So I learned with time to respond well to those jokes, and that works with them. So definitely, um, first, be friendly, establish that, let's say, trustful relationship with them, kind of friendly, and then your business will be more successful with them for sure.
And anybody and people will listen to this and say, oh, but don't you need to do this with every business? And I would say no. If you're talking to a Polish or to a Russian or to Ukrainian, I don't care about building a relationship with you. I am
I don't
business
care about
oriented. I want to do things fast, fast, fast. So yes, there is a big difference with people from Indonesia. If you have an opportunity to visit in person, visit in person. You need to be also consistent and you need to be transparent, right? So on a lot of occasions, like we have customers who come to us, right? And our customers, they lie to us because they think if they lie to us, we can get a better result from them. Those customers, what do we do with them? We say goodbye, thank you very much, because we need to build trust, right, between each other. The same goes for the manufacturers, especially in Indonesia. If you are transparent on what you want and what your targets are, they will try as much as possible to get you what you actually want. And I think another big thing is you need to make sure to do a little bit of research. Watch a documentary that is 10, 20 minutes long or 1 hour long about history of Indonesia and also about religious and cultural holidays, because Indonesia, it has been a colony of so many countries. It has many different religions and people and food and relationships and nations, right? It's a melting pot. So this is something to consider. Okay, so
Yeah.
let's take a look. Which factories have you visited in Indonesia? For which products, Anya? Which products have you seen in Indonesia?
Well, yes. And I just want to kind of make a connection to answer the question and make a connection to what you spoke about before. There was definitely one highlight in
Yeah.
Indonesia when it comes to them being friendly and so on. So we visited wood factory in Bali, and Bali has specific regulations to how big factories can be and what they can actually produce. And this was actually quite a big factory for Bali. And so we came there. There was the big boss, and he took us to the factory. They were really nice to us and everything. So when our sourcing group entered the van, the big boss and his workers and possibly his wife, they were sending us hearts, giving us hearts from the bus.
Yeah.
And it was so like, oh, moment, you know. And so, yeah, that was one of the situations where, you know, their warmth really came into the picture. So yeah, that being said, in Bali, we visited most of the factories, as I said, who are doing the handcraft items. Very interested. Also, we visited a glass factory, a lot of wood factories, rattan, leather items, factory that does recycled stuff and so on. While in Jakarta, we visited bigger factories, clearly. We have visited a factory that, also in Jakarta was interesting because we have visited a factory that produces straws made out of
Yeah,
rice.
that was a very good product. This is something that
It was amazing
McDonald's
product.
should consider, not paper straws, but straws out of rice, because they were so good.
Yeah, they are. And I still have some here at home in Montenegro. And so that factory also did something is happening. Yeah, they had another food production area where we entered, and we wore the suits and we wore all the protective clothing and stuff. And they actually made food items for some of the famous brands like
Yeah.
Quackers. And so that was one of the factories. We visited silicone factory, huge packaging factory. They produced for Michael Kors and some other world famous brands, I think LG as well. We've seen that the towel factory, the biggest towel factory in Indonesia, they did everything. So the only thing that they didn't have was
Grow
actually
cotton, because they
like
received raw
organic,
cotton,
like big
which was
cotton. Yeah.
still dirty, and they cleaned it and they
Yeah.
did all of the processes to weave it to make towels. And touching a towel that is like 1000 GSM is like, oh my god, this is the best towel I've ever touched in my life. And this is insane, because you're covering the full supply chain. And thinking that factories like this actually exist in Indonesia, I never thought that, but they're there. Okay, cool. So now I want to do a little bit of comparison, Anya, between China and Indonesia, and hence I'm sharing a file here, right? So in Indonesia, the lower, and we're basing this specifically on the textile industry, on the garments, okay? So in Indonesia, we have lower labor costs in comparison to China, right? China currently is definitely higher wages. Indonesia is about 200 bucks. China is $600 to $800 a month. So workforce in Indonesia, the workforce is younger. They want to train. They want to learn the skills. So that means at the same time that you have a lot of untrained workers, right? But at the same time, they're really, really willing, and they have a lot of younger generation. Whereas in China, you already have the skilled workers and they're experienced. But a lot of people, they want to go away from the manufacturing, right? So if we take a look at, let's say, United States, right? Trump saying, I want to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Anya, you don't live in the United States. You live in Montenegro. I live in Germany. I'm originally Russian. Anya, would you like Montenegro to bring manufacturing to Montenegro and you going and working and assembling iPhones?
No, I don't want to
Do
do
you,
that.
do you
Sorry.
have any friends who would be? No.
People don't want to work those types of
No,
jobs,
no,
unfortunately.
people don't want to work those types of jobs, and that's perfectly fine. So, and the United States, where a lot of people work in a service industry rather than manufacturing industry, they don't want to go and assemble phones. That's just not smart, right? So we know. I'm trying to select a good here, a good ratio. So Indonesia is a country where companies like Apple are investing a lot of money. If you guys want to take a look and Google Apple investment in Indonesia, March 2025, I'm not going to open a secret for you, but you can Google this and see what I mean and see why Indonesia is one of the countries that you should be investing in terms of manufacturing. Okay, compliance. So compliance in Indonesia is definitely on the lower part in comparison to China, but we have seen some shady factories in China still, and you will continue seeing this, and it is present everywhere. The question is, which factory do you want to work with? All right, so next points. Or Anya, do you have anything to add to this, to the costs and the labor dynamics, China versus Indonesia?
I actually think you described it pretty well. Indonesia, younger, more motivated, stronger. So definitely an
For
advantage.
me, one of the bigger things that I haven't placed down here, but no Chinese New Year. And the factory workers no, but factory workers in Indonesia, they live right around the factory. They don't travel to another province once a year to see their family. They're always there, which is a huge hurdle when it comes to
Happier.
China, right? So this is a very big thing.
Yeah, they're happier.
Okay,
Yeah.
infrastructure. Obviously, logistics, infrastructure, transport in China extremely developed. Indonesia is on the way. Roads are being built, investments are being made, etc., etc. We have raw materials. So Indonesia, yes, they import a lot of raw material from China, but they're also importing raw materials from other countries, and they also have a lot of their own resources for many products. And they actually, the factory that Anya, you mentioned, right, the textile factory, they actually export to China, right? They actually export the products to China. So the threads, they export to China.
Mm, yeah.
Okay, so Indonesia, it's a lot more flexible in terms of manufacturing, so smaller MOQs. Lead times, I am saying here they're longer, but on average, to be honest, the lead times are very similar to China. So a few other things. So export growth, foreign investment, right? And tech adoption. Of course, China is ahead everywhere, but Indonesia is getting all of those things in. So, of course, currently Indonesia is behind pretty much on everything, but they're putting a lot of money into development. And this is why it's important to have the first mover advantage. You, as a buyer, might have a few more struggles in the first few years, but by the time you're established and big and know everything, the prices will start increasing because there will be people flooding into Indonesia. We have seen the exact same thing happened in Turkey. Because remember, Anya, 5 years ago, we took all of the German customers, let's go to Turkey, 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 Turkey. And now, ooh, Turkey is expensive, too many people. Same thing will happen. I
Yeah,
mean, it will take a
true.
lot longer for Indonesia for this to happen, but it will happen. So we're almost out of time. So I just want to show some of the products that can be sourced in Indonesia. And as you can see, this is tons of different categories, tons. So this is from, again, products of mass production and mass consumption to very unique and higher quality, higher class products. From tiny silicone products, yes, silicone manufacturing, plastic manufacturing, you can find in Indonesia, to the most beautiful furniture in the world. So,
Mm.
Anya, and we of course do our Indonesia sourcing trip. The next one is coming up in July. The one after that is coming up in October. If you're interested, you can always go on the website. We have tons of videos in there and useful information that will be useful for you for sourcing as well, right? Anya, anything you want to add? Anything specific about Indonesia? Anything about sourcing in Indonesia that you want to recommend to people?
I was just looking at this photo and remembering the nice times. No, definitely, if there is someone who is thinking about sourcing, moving to Indonesia, or just different options,
Yeah.
I think this trip is not just amazing business opportunity, but also opportunity to hang out, to do the sightseeing, to meet the culture, to just a mix of everything. I think something that definitely should not be missed. It's such a great combo, I think, for someone who's thinking about doing business, because you get everything in that trip. Very overwhelming for sure.
I absolutely agree. I think Indonesia has wonderful potential when it comes to doing business, to finding manufacturers, and to manufacturing your products. Again, we will be doing another webinar to provide even more information, and we will actually show you step by step on an example of one particular product, of how to find the product, the communications, and everything, right? And we will be covering even deeper parts in regards to Indonesia. Unfortunately, yes, like somebody is given a note, sadly, that the labor cost was actually one of the reasons why Indonesia being chosen compared to China. Yes, it is. And you know what? At some point back in the day, other countries also had lower labor costs. I remember the days when China had labor costs of $150 per month. But we also need to understand that currently in Indonesia, those workers who are being paid $200, they're not only surviving, they're living on that salary, because you can live a lot cheaper in Indonesia than by now you can in China, or if you compare it to US. In US, you're of course not going to survive on $200, but it is up and coming country with opportunities, and where workers can be taught, and later on more skilled workers. Of course, there will be increase in the salaries for the workers. This is a normal development for the country, but the more business is being brought into Indonesia, the better it will be for the country's development, as long as it's sustainable business and it helps people, not only corporations. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Anya, for taking the time. We'll
Thank you,
see
Yulia.
you at the next webinar. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Again, if you have any questions, You can go on our Indonesia Trip website. We also have our Zignify Global Product Sourcing website, which is zignify.net. Thank you all. Good luck in all of your business and all of your ventures. And we will see you later. Thank you and bye.
Bye.
Bye.